Hey there, friends. It's time for another Props from the Past. This one from 6 years ago. The great year of 2015, the year Brittany quit her job to join this dog and pony show full time. One of the very first projects we finished after Britt quit her job was this one, our District 9 rifle, which was a big deal for me because I got to work with Tested on this and SmoothOn, and we did it all for San Diego Comic-Con, and it was super, super fun. It was really ambitious, and we did it all inside of 3 weeks. And we made 4 videos.
I mean, they're not like our current videos.
No.
These are little like 6-minute videos.
Yeah, they're quite a bit shorter. But we're going to watch them all today. So let's dive right in.
This project series is brought to you by the fine folks over at SmoothOn and the wonderful people at TESTED.com. Thanks, you guys. Hey everyone, it's Bill Duran here from Punished Props, and I've got a really cool project sitting right over there that I've started working on.
Yeah.
This is big. Whoa, check that out.
Everyone look at my prop.
So yeah, you filmed this before it was done.
Yeah, I did, I guess.
That is just a couple hunks of MDF at
Yeah.
this point. That's really cool.
Is the start of the rifle from District 9. I had a chance to chat with my friends Will and Norm over at Tested.com.
Oh,
So
look at
that's
that.
their old studio.
Aw.
Oh man, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And we decided to do this really cool project together for San Diego Comic-Con, which is
I
coming
remember
up.
why I was in
like
San
really
Francisco.
soon.
I was in San Francisco for something, and I stopped by the Tested office, and that's when we cooked up this whole thing. But I don't remember why I was there initially.
Maybe just visiting friends?
I don't remember.
This is the project, a rifle from District 9. This first part is going to deal with the fabrication process of the main gun body. First, the materials and tools, which will all be linked down below so you can check them out for yourself. Most of the gun body is made out of MDF because it's cheap and readily available. I also have a little bit of styrene plastic in there, also very available. As far as tools are concerned, most of this was done with cutting and sanding using a variety of tools like scroll saw, a bandsaw, a handsaw, different handsaws, and what else? There's another one in there. Right, a jigsaw. And lots of sanding, including a disc sander, hand sander, belt sander, the sander
of
sander.
sanders.
Oh, oscillating spindle sander, which is
Yeah.
really cool. And some nail files and sanding twigs.
But no 3D printing at all. Like, we still hadn't dove into 3D printing yet. I still think if I made something like this today, I would do a lot of it with like more traditional materials and tools, just because it's so big.
And it's so angular too.
Yeah.
Like it's like the part you held up before was like that's just a basic
Yeah, a lot of
rectangle really.
a lot of geometry primitives in there.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the little details, I'd probably 3D print now.
Most of the build process actually happened in the design phase. I used references from the kit that Weta put out a couple of years ago, as well as a little 1/4 scale model that I have.
You want to tell the story
I
of that
then
guy?
drew up.
Yeah, so our friends who work at Weta used to work the booths at conventions, and occasionally they get like some merchandise that was damaged a little bit for free. So they got that District 9 rifle, and they thought, hey, I bet Bill would like that one. They gave it to me.
It was really heavy too. Is that metal?
Yeah, the body was die-cast metal.
Yeah.
The tubes on it were plastic, and it was missing some. I have since replaced them.
I think that was in a extra credit video.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll see if we can track that down.
Yeah.
The entire gun using different layers and different thicknesses in SketchUp.
I used
SketchUp.
Each of these layers
I used it. This is
corresponds
the
to a
one
different
project I
thickness of
used it
MDF
on.
wood, including
This is before we
1/4
switched
inch,
to
1/2
Fusion.
inch, 3/4 inch.
Yeah, and it was before Fusion was really a thing. The first time I heard of Fusion, I was in LA visiting Frank, not at his last shop, the one before that. And the guy who makes the helmets, the heads for Jack in the Box. There's a guy who makes Jack's heads for Jack in the Box. He was in the same complex as Frank. I got to meet that guy. He was using Fusion. And I was like, what's that? I'll look into it.
And we were at Autodesk University working
Yes.
and just wandering around. It's an incredible work convention. And they were doing Fusion challenges.
Like a head-to-head Fusion modeling battle.
Yeah, they had to design like robot arms that looked cool. And it was 2 people and they had the displays up. And we just stood there and watched. And I was like, I didn't realize this kind of fabrication was possible.
Yeah.
Like,
especially considering how fast they were.
yeah,
at it.
yeah. So that really sold me on it.
Absolutely. And Colin, a friend from Autodesk, gave me a little walkthrough, and that really kind of set me running.
That really helped.
And 1/8.
Thanks, Colin, if you're
Then
watching.
I was able to lay out all of these different layers and pieces in a blueprint and get it printed out full scale.
I just
at
found
FedEx.
some of those
These blueprint pieces were
blueprints
then
recently,
trimmed out
like
roughly,
yesterday,
and I used a
and
spray
I threw them
adhesive
away.
to stick them to their various thicknesses of wood. Then I basically have a model kit, and I can just cut out all of these pieces and start gluing them together. Using all of my fancy pants saws, I cut
so much
out all the
MDF
different
dust.
pieces.
Yeah,
Kind of
lots.
roughly a little bit, but then I cleaned them up a whole bunch on all of those different sanders that I mentioned earlier before. This was the bulk of the work process, cutting out.
You know, actually, I'm not sure if I give these plans out for free or not. They're not complete, unfortunately. This is one of the projects I've done where I've never seen anyone else follow suit.
Might have been one.
Maybe, but lots of other people will make, like, I can't think of any examples because all their stuff's almost gone. But like the mask from the mask, a lot of people take that pattern and make it because it's not too intimidating. But I don't believe anyone has made this one yet.
Little pieces, and then cleaning them up on the sander. This guy has a whole bunch of beveled edges on it, so I also spent a lot of time doing exactly that. Again, using a variety of sanders and saws to cut away material.
A different angle, right?
The bandsaw tilts one way, the scroll saw tilts the other, so they're good for opposing cuts.
At least ones we have.
Ones we own. Your mileage may vary.
And cleaning it up a bunch later on. Once I was happy with a bunch of the detail pieces and
I got a lot of good B-roll in this.
Layers,
It's still
I can
a lot
start
of my face
laminating
talking.
them all together, starting with those
you can
three
see the transition,
sort of
though.
big, thick pieces.
Yeah, compared to videos from a couple
Those
of
guys
years
got
prior.
wood glued together and then clamped down to make sure they were nice and secure. And then I could add these smaller and thinner layers later on. Usually I use super glue for these guys because it dries really fast and it bonds pretty much permanently. Once all those layers were sort of stuck on there, I could go in and sand in any overlap.
I know
or
that
any
the
gaps
spindle sander was pretty new at that
occurred
point.
from the lamination process to have
So
these nice,
perfect for that
smooth,
job.
finished surfaces. Some of the other areas required a little bit more love and some filling. In this case, I used Evercoat's body filler stuff. It's a lot like Bondo, to sort of smear it in some of the gaps, and then once it cured, I go in and clean it up with some sandpaper and some files and make it look all nice and pretty. This entire like cutting out, sanding, beveling, finishing process was repeated a whole bunch of times to get the gun to its current state, which is this guy right here. And it's getting there. I do have a little bit more cleanup work to do on this. Gotta round over some more edges and add a little bit more detail, but it's just about ready to head on to the next phase. The next phase, you say? Oh, this has a whole bunch of different cylinder pieces on it, which means I'm gonna be spending a lot of time in front of my lathe, and that will be in the next video, along with getting this thing prepped for molding.
Cool.
So, if you haven't already, you definitely want to subscribe.
All right,
so that
Bill.
you don't miss the next few
Hit the
stages.
notification bell.
And of course,
I don't
I've
think
got
the
some more
notification
videos that you
bell
ought to go
existed
and
in
check out,
2015.
including some full prop build
Oh, and we still
videos,
had annotations
that
back
are just
then, too.
full of lots of really good information. Thank you guys for watching the
I just
video, and of
played
course,
around
thank
with
you,
that,
Tested,
or
for
hung up
helping me
that,
put on this
bow
project,
as well.
and thank you very much to SmoothOn for supporting the project with their fine materials that I will be using very soon.
Yes.
All right, I better get back to work, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, they sent us about $1,000 worth of silicone and resin for that.
They might have since changed their policies, but it seems like at least back then they were willing to part with product, but not part with just sponsor money.
Right.
So they were like, yeah, we'll just send you a bunch of silicone.
So I asked for a lot.
And resin, yeah. So it was helpful, but it's like we can't exist like that in normal videos because that doesn't pay.
Right.
Rent.
Yeah, you can't pay our rent with silicone.
But for this project, it was very handy.
Yeah, and I ended up making and finishing 2 full guns. One of them is at Tested, and one of them is at SmoothOn.
And the one in Pennsylvania somewhere.
Yeah.
In
Macungie, Pennsylvania.
Video is brought to you by SmoothOn
We actually
and
saw it at
Tested.com.
DragonCon. They brought it down.
Hey everyone,
for
it's Bill
DragonCon
Duran
Reynolds.
here from Punished Props, coming at you with part 2 of the Tested District 9 rifle.
We must have just gone to that Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish concert. Remember going to concerts, everyone?
build. If you missed part 1, go watch it. You don't want to have any spoilers or anything. That's when we built the sort of main rifle body part.
It's funny,
In this video, we're we're going to
Sort of
handle a
hot
whole
and cold
bunch of
with
these
whether or not
sort
I
of
wear glasses
tubular
in these videos.
cylindrical
Nowadays, I just
pieces.
wear my glasses.
The best
I'm
way to
lazy,
make
but-
pieces like that is with a lathe. And for that lathing, I decided to go with a material called Wren Shape. This is a urethane tooling foam.
Still have a bunch of it,
And
too. I just
even
moved that
though
box
it's
yesterday.
technically foam, I went with a
This is
really
a
high
jazz
density
theme
stuff. It
music
actually
from
feels kind of
Katamari
like
Damacy.
stone.
Oh, Andrew
rock.
Allen,
It's
yeah.
really rigid and
Katamari on the
really
Rocks, I
great for
believe the
lathing.
song's called.
The pieces were cut down roughly to shape using the bandsaw, and then they got centered and stuck in the lathe.
Sure would have been great to show
The
everyone
process
that.
is fairly simple. Your piece gets spun
there
along
we
one
go.
axis, and then you use chisels and other tools to sort of whittle it away down to your cylindrical shape. Essentially, you just whittle it down to a rough cylinder shape about the main width of your piece, and then you can go back in with some other tools and carve in all of your little
That
detailed
easy.
pieces
That's
and
awesome.
different angles and stuff. I did this for all of the different pieces on the gun
Oh,
that
jeez,
were
that was a lot of work. I forgot. I think I still have these pieces too. But I like this huge chunk right there. That's probably like $40 or $50 worth of
Yeah.
Wren Shape.
Yeah,
It's
and
massive.
that was all gifted to us.
Yeah,
there were
yeah.
offcuts that someone got and mailed to us.
Mhm.
So like that was like a treasure trove.
Oh yeah, yeah.
cylindrical.
And I could use that
And
again.
then they were
Turn it into
popped
something
off
a
the
little
lathe
smaller.
so we could add a couple more detail pieces to each of them. Some of the stuff you just can't do on the lathe. For example, this one piece here, we added a little notch on the top of it using the bandsaw. Many of the other pieces were detailed using my Dremel. A lot of these just sort of by hand using that and a knife and maybe a file to do a little bit of cleanup work.
Boy, sure would
Some of the
Sure
details
would have loved to see a little more of that process, huh?
were not subtracted from the piece, but added to. So, for example, some little line pieces could be glued down using a
Tell you
styrene
what, for doing that all freehand though with a rotary tool, I think I did a pretty darn good job.
plastic sheet. Once I was happy with how these pieces looked, I decided it was time to make some molds of them. The reason for molding, of course, is to make pieces that are a lot more durable than those masters that we built. Also, the barrel gun part has like 24 of those tube things. So instead of lathing all of them, I can make one of them, make a mold of it, and then cast a whole bunch
Right
of
on.
copies. For molding, these are pretty simple one-part dump molds. The pieces get glued down to a flat surface, and then we build a mold box around them. A lot of
Like
them,
seeing
since
the
they're
half-finished gun in the background too there.
Yeah.
cylinders instead of a box-shaped box, like some of them, we would just use a tube. In this case, just a cardboard shipping tube that I've got lying around. These tubes were glued down around their pieces, and then we mixed up some silicone. In this case, we used
There we go.
SmoothOn's
Like,
mold
at any
star
point, Bill's gonna cut the footage.
platinum Cure silicone, mix it up, put
This is
it in
about
the
where I
degassing chamber.
started
to make sure
helping
we
out
get
with
rid
the
of any
project.
bubbles that might offend us later on. And then poured that silicone right in the mold boxes. Nothing fancy, just dumped them right in there.
That's Mold
Once that's
Star 15. And man, is it finicky. Like, it will not cure for 1,000,001 reasons.
Silicone cured,
It's
we
great,
go back
it's great,
in and
but-
liberate all of our masters from
Pain in the ass to work
their
with.
silicone prisons. This leaves a void in the silicone that is the exact same shape as the masterpiece that we can go back in, dump in plastic resin to make copies of our pieces. And that's how all of the cylinder pieces were done. But what about that giant rifle body thing? Well, we're gonna get to that one
Okay.
next time. That was a lot more complicated. I built my very first matrix mold for that guy, and we'll get to that next time. So you
Excellent.
definitely want to subscribe so that you don't miss that one. Of course, part one, go see that
We ended
one
up
if
making
you
a
haven't
gang
already. A
mold
lot of
for
good
those.
stuff over there.
made
and we've got
One
some
mold,
other videos
copy,
you want to check out.
cast 5 of them, and then
Thank you guys
then
for watching,
molded
and of
those.
course,
Yeah.
thank
So we
you
could
very
cast
much
5
to
at a time.
SmoothOn
Yeah.
for supplying the mold making and casting materials for this project.
That was before we had a
And
pressure pot.
Thank you to Tested for putting on this entire
Because
project.
I had some trouble
you guys
with bubbles
were
in there.
awesome.
Forgot about that.
That's all I got for today, you guys. We'll see you all next time.
All right.
Brought to you by the fine folks
getting
over
exciting.
at
Can't wait to see how it
SmoothOn
turns
and
out.
the wonderful humans at Tested.com. Hey everyone, it's Bill
No
Duran
glasses
here
this
for
time.
Punished Props. Welcome to part 3
I think
of
your
the
microphone
Tested
is
District
dying in
9
this one.
rifle
Yeah.
You
build.
can hear some
Struggling.
So
static,
far,
yeah.
we built this master thing. This giant
Oh,
guy
I
here.
finished it.
And
Pretty much how it looks
we
now.
did a whole bunch of turning on the lathe and did a little bit of mold making. Make sure to check out both of those videos.
I bet the comments in the previous video, a bunch of people said that it's not lathing, it's turning. And I bet I corrected myself.
But now, time for part 3. This giant guy I just showed you, that huge piece, I needed to make a mold of that, and it's gigantic. And I've been meaning to learn how to make a matrix mold for a long time.
This definitely wasn't a tutorial.
Like, project
you finished
to do
that
so.
gun off camera.
In hindsight, maybe I should have gone with something a little bit smaller,
yeah.
but come on, who's up for a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Matrix mold.
If you're gonna do a matrix mold for the first time, I recommend something much smaller. Yeah.
Molds are a lot of work, but they're also really, really handy. You end up using a lot less silicone, you usually end up with a better product, and you usually end up with a mold that lasts a lot longer. Now, this was my first...
Imagine if you... Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that's Rob's drill there. I totally stole my brother's drill for a while.
That's amazing. I was gonna say that, so the process of the matrix mold, you end up with a thinner layer of silicone over the whole piece. Which a lot of people are doing these days by 3D modeling the master, printing it, and also 3D modeling the matrix mold jacket, printing that, and then you end up with this air gap between the two pieces that you pour the silicone into, which is just amazing how well that could work.
And it saves a ton of time.
Yeah.
You don't have to get any clay or anything. It skips that whole step.
I can't imagine 3D printing the giant shell that would have been the matrix mold for this guy, but we could have done it.
Could have had Joel help us with one of his giant 3D printers.
Matrix mold, and I'm totally standing on the shoulders of giants here. I had a bunch of help from some of my friends. My pal Tom over at Sorenzo Props. He did a whole video series on making a matrix mold of a helmet. You should definitely go check that out. It's really, really great, super comprehensive. I also got a lot of great insight from my pal Harrison over at Vulpin Props, who's been making a lot of matrix molds lately, and Frank Ippolito helped out a little bit too. He's a swell guy. So with my piece in hand.
Frank is the person I know who has, well, Frank and Harrison. In the last decade, Harrison got a crap load of experience with a lot of really cool molds, but Frank is still like mold guy #1. I got to work in his shop for like a week, and we were working on our project, and other people were making molds for like immortal masks and everything. Just getting to like witness their mold making process was like a religious experience for me. It was amazing.
Ready to make a matrix mold.
Yeah.
How does it go? Well, hold on to your butts, it's about to get crazy. First thing I did, I made a wooden frame for this guy to sit in. This was to make sure that the master would sit and have a level area that would be roughly halfway through the piece. Then I made some flanges that went on that piece there to provide registration for the jacket mold later on. These were covered in foil tape to make it so that the fiberglass later on would not bond to the wood. Then the master got covered in something to protect it during the mold making process. I should have used some dry cleaning plastic bags that Harrison recommended to me. Unfortunately, they didn't get here in time, so I tried using wet paper towels. This turned out to be a disaster because my piece is made out of sandpaper and it took some water damage during the process.
I'm delirious. Yeah, look at this squinty eye. Yeah, the MDF absorbs wood like crazy, or wood. Now I'm having problems. MDF wood absorbs water like crazy, and it swells. It changes the shape of the master, so that it's not the right shape anymore.
So, lesson learned, be a little bit patient, you guys. Once the piece was in the frame, ready to go, the whole thing got clayed up. Basically, I got covered in a...
I don't know if I talk about it, but you see the tray I made? I'm running a wire through it. That's how I get 1/4-inch thick
deli
slabs
slices
every time. It's so helpful.
Delicious
layer
slices
of clay
meat.
that would simulate the silicone later on. So I cut strips of clay out at about a 1/2 inch thick, laid them all over the piece,
you know,
and
if
then
we used
sculpted
oil-based
them down.
clay, the moisture wouldn't have been a problem. It would have been a lot of oil-based clay, but since we used water-based clay, we had to use wet paper towels and
nice and smooth. I also sculpted on a whole bunch of registration lines and marks and stuff to make sure that the jacket mold would fit right on top of the silicone piece and stay nice and snug. Then I sunk in some cardboard tubes.
This took days also. I just want to point out, this was a crap load of work. It took forever.
Pour silicone in later on. Once I was happy with this half of the claying, We sprayed the whole thing down with some crystal clear acrylic spray paint to hopefully make it easier to pop the clay out later on. And then I put petroleum jelly around the border of the mold piece so that we could get it to separate from the fiberglass. And then it was time to lay down the fiberglass.
Hey.
All of the clay got covered with a couple layers of fiberglass
this all outside.
resin and fiberglass cloth.
Yeah. So we're also using polyester resin there. Now I'll use epoxy nowadays for something like this, but back then, actually nowadays I would have put down a coat of epoxy coat first, and then backfill it with fiberglass cloth and like epoxamite or something like that. But growing up, I did fiberglassing when we worked on boats, and we always used just normal fiberglass cloth and normal polyester resin from the hardware store. So that was like my first impulse when we did this. But then I went and worked in Frank's shop, and they were using all epoxy coat and stuff.
The 90-degree angles on the registration marks are a huge pain to use the fiberglass strips on. The strips didn't want to stay down wedged in there. I think we would use fiberglass shredded mat maybe?
Right, yeah, you can get it all like chopped up.
Yeah, which we did for the bleach hollow mask matrix mold. But yeah, like this one, like our jacket ended up with like lots of air bubbles stuck in the fiberglass.
Providing a hard shell around the entire thing. We
cloth
also put a metal tube on there
they make fancier
to keep
fiberglass
the
cloth.
mold, because it's so long, keep it nice and rigid and keep it from flexing. When that side cured, we could flip the whole thing over and take off that frame piece that I made earlier on. Then it got cleaned up a little bit, and we clayed up the other half of the gun. Again, nice uniform thickness of clay over the entire thing. Again, we did the same thing here, applying a fiberglass shell on the other side. Once that cured, we trimmed up the edges a bit to make it nice and clean and safe. That fiberglass can be really pointy. And I drilled a bunch of holes
we didn't make it
so
that
we
safe.
could clamp it together with bolts later on.
not
Then we opened the
comfortable
clamshell
holes.
and rescued our piece from all of that clay. We kept the clay though, because we needed to figure out how much silicone to use. So we used water displacement to figure out the volume of the clay, and that's roughly how much silicone we needed. Hey, that's math, guys. So we cleaned all the clay out of the fiberglass jacket mold, and then we put
we were hoping this clay would just lift right out of there. And this took, what I thought was going to be a 10-minute step, took like 3 hours.
Piece back into the jacket mold and clayed it up one more time. This claying was to create.
Now I'm like, we'll use the oil-based clay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we didn't need as much clay for this. We just had to, make the seam line.
Yeah, and look how orange it is still. I still have that clay now, and it is a very gross shade of gray.
Seam line between the two halves of the silicone. So once it was all nice and uniform, we cut in some registration keys in the clay.
I also didn't really point out, but in the nose there, you can see there's a silicone plug. I clayed that up and filled the nose with it. This is actually a 4-part mold, not a 2 or 3, 4-part.
And then got it ready for silicone. Before pouring in the silicone, I had drilled in a whole bunch of bleeder holes. This is so that when we poured the silicone into the jacket, as it's filling that cavity, the air can get out and the silicone can go fill all the areas of that jacket. I brushed on a layer of Rebound 25 silicone. This was to make sure that I captured all of the detail on the side of the gun, and also to keep any curing inhibition from happening. Once that—
Yeah, I didn't trust that the green, that Moldstar 15 wouldn't, I didn't trust that it would cure against the surface of that. So I used a different silicone. That Rebound 25 is like bulletproof.
Yeah, for a platinum silicone, it's pretty great. I think the Moldstar series is much more temperature sensitive too. So like our shop was a little cold. I think it can, like any kind of latex in the area can inhibit it. And we worked with latex on our foam then, and so who knows.
Was nice and set up. We could clamshell the whole thing together and pour in.
We don't even have that mold anymore. We gave it to SmoothOn.
In this case, we used Moldstar 15. As the silicone was going in and bleeding out of those bleeder holes, my wife Brittany ran around with little pieces of clay and plugged them up once a little bit of silicone had leaked out. We let that silicone cure and then flipped the whole thing over, sounding familiar, and did the other half. We removed the clay from this side and then sprayed on some mold release to make sure that the two halves of silicone would not bond together. Once it was all set, brushed on a layer of Rebound, clamshelled it together, poured in a bunch of Moldstar, and let it set. Once it was all—
didn't fill a single bit of it. Nope. Why would we?
All cured, the mold is done. All that's left
I just love that like days of work will go by without filming a thing.
is about an hour of me trying to pry that whole thing apart.
Yeah.
It did come apart though. We were able to pull the mother
So
mold.
the silicone fills every nook and cranny in that mother mold perfectly. So frequently getting it apart can be a pain. The registration lines I made on there, they could have had a better draft angle. I remember when Tom did that Daft Punk helmet, he was struggling to get that mold jacket off on a live stream for at least 45 minutes.
Yeah, he had like his air compressor shooting air into it, trying to separate it. Like I imagine there's some bonding in the bleeder holes with the silicone too. Like it's.
So we did all that. We just didn't film any of it.
Yeah.
Shells off and then liberate the master
And that
from the silicone
plug in the
piece.
bottom there was the fourth.
And voila!
It's not the plug
Matrix
isn't
mold,
there yet.
all
but-
done.
you didn't really mention
what
that
this
at
leaves
all.
us with
No.
is a silicone mold that is an exact negative copy of our master.
It's really pretty.
And then
Yeah, I like
a
it.
jacket mold that's rigid that holds the silicone in place and keeps it into the right form for casting, which we'll do next time.
Yeah.
Again, this was my first Matrix mold. I had a lot of help from my friends, so thank you guys very much. Thank you guys for watching, and if you haven't already subscribed, you should totally do that so you don't miss the next part, the last part, the stunning conclusion to the molding and casting process. Thank you again to SmoothOn for providing all of these wonderful casting materials and mold making materials, and of course, thank you to the guys over at TESTED.com for putting on this project. Looking forward to the next one, you guys. It's gonna be crazy.
Well, who decided the District 9 rifle?
So I had lunch with Norm and Will. It was like this little place right down the street from their old shop. I remember we were all just hanging out there, and we were just like, "Hey, we should do a thing for San Diego Comic-Con." And we just started throwing ideas around there, and that was one that I had wanted to make at some point, and they were over the moon for it. So. Yeah, that's how
they're like, yeah, you're gonna do all the work, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that big, crazy, stupid. Yeah, you'll do it, no problem. They scrounged up a little money and connected with SmoothOn to get the materials, and we made it happen.
By SmoothOn and Tested.com. Hey everyone, it's Bill Duran here from Punished Props, and welcome.
And I definitely filmed that on the same day.
The fourth installment, the final installment of the Tested
Yes, we're
District
casting and
9
painting
rifle build.
on one video.
The last
Yeah.
few videos that you should definitely watch before you see this one. Spoilers. We built the master. We made some stuff on the lathe. We made some molds. And in the last one, we made a giant matrix mold. In this one, we're going to be casting and painting all of the wonderful pieces for this gun,
a lot of
assembling it,
pieces.
It's so many
finalizing the entire piece. So most of the smaller pieces
I want to know
of
if we have footage of me casting this thing, because it was a challenge.
this gun were done
think
with
so.
simple dump molds. Usually there are 1 or 2 piece molds, and we would just mix up a little bit of resin. In this case, we used a whole bunch of
More Andrew Allen
Smoothcast
music.
300 and some So Strong tint to make them a dark gray color. We mix up the resin and then just dump it in the mold and let it cure. Once the urethane resin
Nice and
cures,
simple.
it can be popped out of the mold, and we've got a perfect copy of our original masterpiece. The big tube on the bottom of the gun was a different story. I didn't want that to be a full solid piece.
Oh.
I'd waste a whole bunch of resin and it would be really, really heavy. So instead, I did some rotocast.
Excellent.
Again, a little
Did you
bit of
film any of it,
resin,
Bill?
in this case Onyx Fast, was mixed up and poured
All
into
right.
the mold. Then I slushed the resin around, just rotating a whole bunch to coat
This
the
is
whole
when I
inside
thought
of the mold.
I wanted to get one of those hot dog cookers from like 7-Eleven. Just turn the heat off so you could just leave it rolling.
Yeah.
I mean, we could build something.
I
like
mean,
that.
you could probably use like a rock tumbler.
That's
setup.
true. That's
Like,
probably better.
yeah.
I did this a couple of times until there was a nice thick layer on the inside of the mold. And then the piece could be popped out again like the
Perfect.
rest of
That
them,
worked
and we
out
had
really
another
well.
Yeah.
perfect copy. The giant matrix mold was a totally different story.
what I'm interested
Again, I didn't want to just dump in a bunch of resin to make a fully solid piece. It would waste a ton of resin and it would be ridiculously heavy. So instead, I opened the mold halves, and each half I poured in a little bit of resin. Again, we used Smoothcast 300 for
I was
this.
just trying
And
to
I left
like
it untinted.
kind of
secures white,
rotocast it.
and the main color on this gun is white, so I figured that made sense. So I poured in resin on either side to capture the details, and then on one of the sides, I stuck in some insulation foam blocks.
I used to do this when I made my Mass Effect guns. Instead of rotocasting them, I would backfill part of them with foam so that it would take up a lot of room.
And
These
that works
were stuck in
for
when the
small
resin
things.
was still curing, so that they would kind of adhere
There's a lot of
to it
heat
after it cured.
Yes.
in
This
resin
way, when we closed up the
curing.
mold, they would stay in place,
Mhm.
which is exactly what we did next. The mold got closed up, bolted together.
Probably should
and
have
then we started
coated the
pouring
insulation foam in
in
resin.
stages.
Yeah, in a thin
beforehand.
coat.
We added
Yeah.
a little bit at a time, and
That's a great idea, Brittany.
Because what was happening was we would pour in resin, and bubbles started coming up, and we're like, oh, there must have been air pockets.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure the insulation foam was dissolving from the heat.
Yeah.
So it kept getting heavier and heavier.
We kept mixing up more.
my athletic wife, Brittany, would slush it around a whole
Look
bunch.
at us go.
Make sure we didn't trap any giant bubbles inside of there. We did this in like 3 or 4 stages until we finally
I would
filled
love
up
to get
the
a
entire mold
cross section
with
of that.
resin.
Just cut the whole thing in
And
half
let
and
it
see
cure all the
what
way.
the inside looks
Like
like.
the rest of the pieces, once it was fully cured, it could be liberated from the mold, leaving a perfect copy.
I didn't have the plug on the back.
Oh yeah, because we had to pour it in.
I wasn't planning on slush casting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our master. Then, after a little bit of sanding and cleanup work, all of the parts were ready for paint. For the most part, we would just prime them all with some rattle can primer to get them ready to go for color.
I like how we didn't
then
show
the
casting
base color
No.
was
all
laid
of
down
those.
on all of the parts. Most of them were just black or white. In the case of this big fella right here, we added just a whole bunch of white over the entire thing. Then we could start adding on more and more layers of color. We did this by putting down some pieces of masking tape to cover the areas we wanted to keep, and then by spray painting or airbrushing.
I would love to know how many days I actually spent painting this thing.
Yeah.
I bet it was like 3, which is insane.
all of the other areas we wanted to be a new color. In the case of the main gun body, we did this a couple of times to get the orange layer and then
Were
to
you
add a
doing
black
2 at
layer
once,
later
or
on.
did you do one
Some of
and
the
then
other
the other?
areas were a little bit more fine detail.
That's a fantastic question. I have no idea.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It might have been like you had to finish the other one after San Diego Comic-Con, or like
Probably.
or that's when you did it. Because
Yeah.
I don't think you did both before.
Detailed, so I just used a brush, painted them in. This gun has some really cool decals and logo type things on it. I made some stencils using my vinyl cutter and then laid down that low-tack stencil vinyl onto the piece and
I always say this
dabbed
every
that
time,
paint
but
on
adding machine gun
using just a
stencils to your
normal
prop
brush. Once the paint was
instantly
nice and
makes
dry,
it look
I
more
could peel
legit.
that stencil away, leaving a really
one
cool
of my favorite
looking
things.
design behind. At this point, I could also start attaching pieces to the gun. A lot of the little pieces, like the barrels, got screws added to them so that they could be socked into place and nice and secure. And those side sort of heatsink greebles, those got added too. That big hollow tube that I made that goes on the bottom, I added a screw and a bolt to that so that it could be unscrewed and detached for shipment.
Shipping this thing was not trivial.
Did you ship it with all the side things attached?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That part came out, but all the tubes. So I had to build a box. I don't know if we show it, but it might be in the tested video when we pull it out.
Yeah, I'll link that video below.
Yeah.
When Bill was at San Diego Comic-Con, they did a show and tell of Bill's prop next to the Weta one.
Yeah.
I think they were both there, and Frank was there, and Bill had a costume. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Then the entire thing got hit with some matte clear coat to protect all that wonderful paint that we threw down. And then it was time for weathering. For the most part, we just did a whole bunch of dirty washes over the entire thing, which is very apparent when you have a white gun. It gets dirty really fast. Most of this
I love that though. I love how like the white
got
gets
laid
stained.
over everything and then cleaned off a whole bunch using
You just have to be
paper
careful to
towels.
not go
Once it was
too
dirty
far.
enough, it was time to attach to all of those crazy barrel tube thingies that go on there. There's 24 of them.
The ends of those, I think, were just dusted with spray paint.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah,
middle
I think
looking
I think
ends.
the next one we did with an airbrush, so it was a little more fine. But yeah,
Right.
that was just outside. I think I did that with just
Yeah.
spray paint. We were in a
I
hurry.
painstakingly glued them in one at a time, making sure they were all nice and lined up. Then I did a little bit more weathering around the bases of those tubes to make sure they
look at
sort of
those, perfectly lined up.
Makes sense. Fit with the rest of the piece. The last little bit, tiny bit of detail, I mixed
this
up
is
a
fun.
little bit of tint and some epoxy, and then dripped it on part of the gun to make it look like some sort of weird alien ooze. And that's it.
Ooh, that's a
The
nice
whole
photo.
freaking thing is done.
Yeah,
Bask in its
I like that
glory.
photo.
Ooh.
It's really cool.
This was a crazy project. We did it in about 3 weeks, and I keep saying we because my wife Brittany
No.
helped out a whole bunch on a lot of the build processes. She did a lot of the casting and a lot of the painting of the little pieces. I couldn't have done it without
That's
her.
right.
She is amazing. Also, of course, again, thank you so much to SmoothOn for providing the molding and casting materials. They worked out great. And of course, thank you to the guys over at Tested, whom I will be hanging out with during San Diego Comic-Con. See you there, you guys. Of course, thank you to you for watching this video and sticking around for the entire process.
Oh.
If you have any questions about the build, let me
I like
know
this guy,
in the
he's nice.
comments down below or hit
So
me up
helpful.
on Twitter @Chinbeard. Until the next big build, you guys, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and I will see you all next time.
Wow. That was a lot.
Wow. I'm tired just watching that build.
Me
And I didn't even
too.
have to do anything.
Oh, jeez.
So we've never finished one of those for ourselves.
No.
We've casted a couple since, and the process has evolved. We now, which we don't do anymore. We don't have the mold anymore, but we would close it all up and rotocast it with 2 people. Usually there would be a strap, and it would be attached to the ceiling.
Yeah, so it would take all of its weight.
Yeah,
right?
and so you just kind of like spin it around. It's still like you and Chris Menges did one time, and then you and Dan made
Yep,
one.
Dan got one. Dan finished his too.
Yeah.
Put a giant suppressor on the end of it.
And we have an unfinished casting, I think, of all the pieces.
Yes,
So
and
someday.
I do sooner rather than later want to finish that. Thank you guys so much for following us along that trip down memory lane. That was a good time. Thanks, Britt, for all the help back then.
Oh, you are welcome.
And I guess we'll catch you next week with some more fun and shenanigans from the shop. See you later, gang.